Welcome to Step Into the Pivot. We're your hosts. I'm Teresa Conti.
And I'm Ivana Polonio. We talk with people just like you. We have honest conversations about current issues that women and men face and how we pivot to address them in our lives.
This podcast is your companion as you step into a workout or take some time for yourself.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our episode, Step Into the Pivot, where we talk to Brendan Shea. Brendan, welcome to the show. So excited to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
So excited to have a conversation with someone who is financial services professional, but also very sporty, almost to a point where some of the things that you've done, and we could talk about them for 20 minutes, are so, interesting that it seems to me like that could be your other career or is your other, the amount of experience you have. Wow. Could fill a whole, full-time job. And then family values, family experiences. We are going to dig into that in this episode. So excited. Teresa, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Brendan? And then
So Brendan and I were just talking about this. We've probably known each other for a good almost 20 years. So when we first met, you were a DCIO wholesaler, living in LA, I believe. But I really did. I always have loved a lot of things about you, Brendan. So I love your, that you love to travel, visit lots of states, countries. I know you went to the base camp at Mount Everest. I think that's a whole nother episode that we could talk about some of those things. I think the thing that I always really appreciated about you is I really do always thought you'd put your family first. Whenever we met, you were always so proud of where they're at and who they are. And I think it's such an important piece of your journey. So I want to start our conversation today by talking about, you are originally from Nashville, as I understand it. And when we met, you were living in LA. So I think you and your wife are both from Nashville and you made that move to LA. And there was some transition there because I think they're completely different cities, especially 20 or 25 years ago, for sure. So can you talk a little bit about what prompted that move, what that transition looked like, and how that really affected your outlook?
Absolutely. So Teresa, Ivana, thank you so much for the invitation. Love spending time with you guys and appreciate that question. So what's interesting is when I started in this business, I worked really hard. I moved out to Denver to become an internal wholesaler. I worked hard for 2 years, and then I was given an opportunity to come back to Nashville to manage a territory. And I thought that was getting an invitation to the big show, if you will. And when I was in Nashville, I just threw myself into work. I was out of balance. I was working Monday through Saturday, 6 days a week. And I just kind of was burning out a little mentally. And I started doing something just to adjust the balance in life. And I remember a friend invited me to come out on a Saturday night at a honky tonk down in Nashville. It's where everybody comes and they sings. And it was a good buddy of mine from grade school. Went to college together. We're in each other's weddings. But he said, Brandon, you got to come out tonight. He's like, we're going to do a bachelor night. It's my wife's coming out with 9 or 10 of her friends. I want you to come out and just meet some folks because I'd thrown myself head first into work. And I just really, my social life was was suffering a bit. And I remember going there at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. And all of a sudden, this beautiful redhead gets up on stage and starts singing. And it just, it's one of those things. I was 27 at the time, and I was kind of getting frustrated with that phrase, when you know. And I was like, man, I was beginning to question that. And then it was like it was like I was hit with lightning when this beautiful redhead gets up on stage and starts singing. And I just started making eye contact with her, and had the courage to get up after her set was done. And I didn't have a pickup line. I said, you were fantastic. I'd love to take you a nice Italian dinner and Phantom of the Opera, which is coming into town in a couple of weeks. And she said yes. And that was September 28, 2002. And we just celebrated our 19th anniversary this week. So that's how it started. But she continued to pursue a music career in Nashville. And then some contacts out in LA invited her to come out there to songwrite and record. That led to an opportunity to go into Star Search with Arsenio Hall. I vividly remember being in Knoxville, Tennessee, coming out of a meeting, running home to my hotel to see Liz perform on TV. which is a surreal experience to see your girlfriend at the time on national TV competing. But it's through that experience, she created a network of folks out there. And for us to pursue her career while I was working with mine, I asked my firm at the time to see if they needed somebody to manage the West Coast. 2 months later, they asked if I was serious, and I said 100%. And we moved from Nashville to LA, and that was a very different environment, but we just absolutely loved it because we were about to get married. I didn't really know anyone in LA, and it was just a brand new adventure together. So that's what took us out there.
Oh, so wonderful. I was just, enjoying every moment of what you were sharing, and this journey that you're describing. Tell us a little bit now about the unique endeavors that the two of you were doing on the inside. So internal level, we talked about, and maybe that did look like external experiences too, but what were you guys doing to enrich and improve yourselves while you were transitioning? And did that attract any new career opportunities? Because you've been talking about, personal and professional life, so interestingly, like weaving those two together. Tell us about the inside job of, enriching yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the question. When we first started dating, Liz and I, from a faith perspective, started talking about churches that we wanted to just kind of explore and potentially become part of a community. So we joined a church out in LA, and immediately on the first weekend we were there, went from knowing 0 people to knowing about 90 to 100 people. We were introduced to a young marriage group out in LA. So we quickly met a large community of people. Liz started performing music in church. And then we also, I got pretty involved as well on a committee, and we actually helped create a new church plant that was in LA. So that was something that we were investing in on a personal side. Simultaneously, I became an absolute student of the industry and also self-improvement. So this is back in 2006, 2007. I started asking the hundreds of advisors that I was working with in Southern California, who is the best advisor and who is the best financial investment wholesaler you can think of? And as these names would pop up, I would ask the follow-up question, why are they standing out? And are there any specific coaching programs that they're working with? And I kept hearing different names pop up, but I kept hearing the similar sources that they're working with. Strategic Coach was a phenomenal entrepreneurial program that I heard about. And so I invested 3 years of my time in Strategic Coach to learn how do very successful people on the financial side and non-financial side run a practice that they love working at and just continue to grow in perpetuity. That also led me to the personal branding group. I took a year with an individual out there who's teaching me how to think about personal branding myself, very, very similar to how a Fortune 500 company would do. I actually worked with Dr. Jay Brunza. He was the only thought coach that Tiger Woods acknowledges, helping him from the ages of 13 to 21 before he became a professional golfer. I was doing the Ironman triathlon, or actually I'd signed up for the Ironman triathlon. I was working out with some buddies by the beach at that time, and it scared the daylights out of me to actually do that because I'm a bigger guy. I was 6'2", 250 pounds at the time, and I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to complete this if my mind is not right? So I worked with Dr. J and just had a phenomenal experience with that. And there were a couple of coaches I worked with, but what I found is when I really put in the work between 2006 and 2010, I started creating some more business successes in my current role as managing the West Coast, but it also attracted a firm to me who asked me to be their national sales manager. So, or actually be a player coach. So continue managing the West Coast and then step into national management. So that was fantastic. That was absolutely a rewarding experience to put in years of work, put in personal investment, a lot of money and a lot of time to try to improve myself, and to see the opportunities that being attracted to me was it just reinforced that, you've got to earn it. I love the analogy from pilots in the military. They have the patch that's on Velcro. You've got to earn your wings every day because that thing can be ripped off and you lose that. So I like that mentality. Stay in the grind, work hard, build a network. Big believer that your network is your net worth. So I really kind of expanded that over that 4 or 5 year period while I was investing in executive coaches. And then while that was happening, Liz also created a business called Our Story, Our Song. It was a custom song business where she would create radio quality session musician level songs for unique events in life, whether it be a wedding, whether it be a birth of a child, whether it be a retirement, whether it be different unique experiences. So she had this wonderful creative outlet while I was doing this stuff on the investment side. She was really connecting with clients on a personal level, creating these events where she would bring in session musicians, recording it and delivering this one-off custom product that people just loved. So it was a very fun experience at the time. A lot of creativity going on.
I was going to say a couple things from that. One is that I love your network is your net worth. I think that is an amazing statement. And I think people lose sight of that a little bit. And I remember when you were going through that journey, I mean, we knew each other then, and I know how hard you were working and, all that was going on. So I think that's an amazing piece of it. And I remember you telling me about Liz's custom songwriting. So that's really fantastic. I think there came a point though, when you guys were in LA, and I think you told me around 2014, where like stress was just too much. And you made that decision to move from LA and move back to Nashville. So was there a defining moment that took you guys there because I'm sure you made that decision together. I mean, that was not just your decision, that was a family decision. Can you talk a little about that?
100%. Yeah. So it goes back to the opportunity that came our way in the fall of 2010. And I was approached by an investment firm to be their player coach and eventually be the national sales manager for them. And when we negotiated that opportunity, it was about 3 years for me to be a player coach and for me to run a territory, which is a full-time job, and also be a national sales manager, living in LA where the bulk of my team was in the East Coast. If you can just imagine being a newly married dad with 2 young kids, traveling almost weekly, it was a lot on one's plate. It was really a recipe in mediocrity, I'll tell you that. But it was like knowing that, hey, 3 years on the backside of this, in 3 years, we'll be able to be a full-time sales manager and most likely move back to Nashville, where Liz's parents are, my parents are, and just have that family base. But if anybody's ever run a race, like a marathon, or if you're crazy enough to do an Ironman, knowing the specific distances is so important. So if you're running a marathon, it's 26.2 miles. Knowing it's 26.2 miles at mile 18 helps you get through the hump. But if you get to mile 26 and all of a sudden the race event coordinator say, no, we're changing it. We're going to take it to 30 miles and tack on some mileage, it is absolutely demoralizing. So what happened in about 2013, when I revisited, 2014, when I revisited with the president, CEO of the firm, I said, hey, we negotiated 3 years and this is and so I'm ready to make that pivot so I can focus on one job solely, because it's tough to manage this and be a dad and be a husband. And a lot of plates were spinning in the air and I didn't want them to crash. Their perspective was that I was probably at mile 6 of a 26.2 mile race, where I thought I was at the finish line. So when you move the goalpost, I really had to advocate for myself and really kind of verbalize saying this was the deal, and having gainful employment and having compensation. It's like having oxygen. You need it, but you have to advocate for yourself. And I was ready to step away if that wasn't going to come to fruition. And simultaneously, another massive stressor was going on in her life at the time. So Liz, I mentioned she had that custom song business, Our Story, Our Song. Some of the work that she had done had attracted the attention of a client who asked if she could create a wedding song as a gift to her husband. And so Liz, being a thorough researcher, interviewed the client's parents, interviewed the future spouse's parents, did a whole 360 analysis, really got to know this individual, wrote a custom song, actually had the client fly in and record in the studio, put a ton of work into this and delivered it. The wedding transpired, and 7 days later, the spouse disappeared. Made international news. FBI got involved. Long story short, about 6 or 7 days after the wedding, there was a marital conflict, and there was a casualty involved with this. It came to light that Liz's song, in retrospect, had some lyrics that were interesting. And she always interviews a client and incorporates that into a song, but some of the words in that were foreboding. And so long story short, we dealt with the emotional trauma of somebody not being there. And then it came to light that the FBI got involved, realized that there was an accident that took place, intentional or not, that somebody lost their life. We had Nancy Grace and CNN calling our house multiple times a day for weeks. And they were hounding Liz. I had friends coming back from Europe saying, why is Liz's picture on the front of Nancy Grace's show coming in from a commercial, going out to commercial? So long story short, that was a really traumatic time to actually engage with a client. And right now that client's in jail for 30 years. So you talk about having a very unique personal experience to do a customized song, getting to know somebody through their parents, and then having something like that. It put Liz into a very tough mental place. Also, something I haven't shared is that when our second child came, our son, in 2011, Liz was dealing with some physical complications, postpartum depression. So you add that to the trauma of what happened in 2013. She was just not in a good place. I think a good reoccurring theme is mental health is so important for women. It's so important for men. And I could see Liz was suffering silently. I didn't know the extent as I do now, having conversations with her. But it just came to a point that we absolutely loved our time in LA. There was a lot of personal growth. But in 2014, it all came to a head that we needed to come back to, and it was beneficial that we came to that conclusion. It was beneficial to come back, have family support, and make sure that Liz was in a good place mentally and spiritually and so forth. So that's part of the reason why we moved back in 2014. So we had a lot of stuff going on. I remember talking to some friends who've unfortunately, their marriage ended up in divorce. And when you kind of do the postmortem, that looking backwards, as human beings, we can only handle so much stress. There's so many events in life. You quit a job, that's stressful. You get married or divorced, that's stressful. These things, there was a lot of stress. I could feel the weight on our relationship. I could feel the weight on our kids. And it's one of those things I was ready to step away from the job if need be, just to make sure that Liz supported place, and then get our kids back where they're supported as well.
What a gripping story from so many perspectives. And I mean the whole story. I don't mean, obviously there's the event that you were talking about that was, highlighted nationally and internationally, but your whole story with all the ins and outs of it. And I really want to highlight the part where this seems like, now that we've brought up some of these, more, intense moments, that this kind of can fly under the radar. But what really caught my attention is when you talked about the courage that it took to advocate for yourself when you were being told by the president and the CEO that, like, oh, no, what do you mean? Like, we're not, no. Like, they're saying no, and you're saying, not so fast.
Yeah.
And then, we proceeded to talk about the more intense stuff. So I'm really interested in, if you could, as we start to wrap up, tell us a little bit more about the maintenance of your emotional and mental health yourself. What is behind that strength you have in that moment, that courage when you're starting to advocate for yourself? That takes, some building of some other muscles than the ones that you build in your sports adventures, but different kind of Ironman we're talking about here. So emotional, mental health, maintenance and support for yourself, and then obviously for your loved ones. Liz, you already mentioned that.
Yeah, I'll go back to that moment because it is so crystal clear. I know exactly where I was when I had that conversation with the president and CEO. I was at a work event with a specific advisory client. We're at Pinehurst. We're at this nice resort. And I remember having the conversation, and Liz was with me, and she was in another room. And I just remember pacing around when they heard that. The heart rate was racing because I knew this conversation had weight on the career. And when they mentioned that, it was almost like a slap in the face. I was like, we had an agreement, you're going back on it. And later that night, somebody offered me another job with another company that would have been a phenomenal compensation package, and it's one of those things that I've only seen it relative to military, but I'm sure people have seen what I'm talking about, but it's one of those things. If you mess around, you find out, you have the X-axis, the Y-axis. If somebody starts messing with you, it's going to lead to a consequence. Meaning, just like I'm willing to meet somebody halfway, but if you change the negotiation, there's going to be a consequence to that, because I came in with full trust, and it's impacting my family. So that's something that, you kind of have the grizzly bear effect right there. You kind of rise up. But I'm a big believer. I came back to Nashville, and let me pause. I started doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu in LA in 2014. And when I came back to Nashville, I started doing jiu-jitsu in 2015 again. The reason why I bring that up is that if anybody's ever done that, it is so uncomfortable. You're constantly going against somebody who's probably stronger or just have more experience, and they put you in situations that are not comfortable. And that's something I'm really trying to drill into myself and drill into my the forefront of my kids' thinking, is that the more comfortable you are being uncomfortable in life, the more you prepared you are, you'll be in pressure situations. If you continue to put yourself in artificially pressure situations, Ironman, doing these races, hiking in the Himalayas, doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you're ready when the curveballs come that you're not expecting. So I feel that even though it's still uncomfortable, when there's an element of confrontation, even though your heart rate, the natural processes of your body react, I think the more time you spend in the uncomfortable zone, that's where the growth is. And I remember going back to that church plant we did in LA, I interviewed a lot of pastors to come in. I vividly remember the pastor who we actually ended up selecting from leadership, but he said, when you grow in life, you have 1 foot in the comfort zone and 1 foot outside the comfort zone. So you're always kind of pushing and growing. So I think it's just that willingness to be okay being in uncomfortable situations, especially when you're advocating for yourself, and doing so, you're advocating for the quality of, your spouse's mental health and well-being, your kids' mental health and well-being, and so forth. So I knew that there was a lot of implications for our family, and that's why, I'm willing to have that fight if it takes care of my family.
Yep. I forgot honestly how amazing you were. So I'm really happy that you shared your story with us today. I mean, I knew some of this, and you kind of forget that, but we're almost at the end. So the question we always ask is, how is this pivot a step forward? And you may have already answered it, because I think you've said a few things here that really have stuck with me, and I think will stick with our listeners. But do you have anything else that you would like to add about that, how that pivot is a step forward for you?
Yes, I would say that what happened in 2014, that was a fork in the road. So we could stay the course. And if we stayed the course, I might not be married. I might have more career accolades. I think that was a decision that, putting the mental health and relationship first paid massive dividends in the relationship with Liz, because she knows that I would, there's a massive trust level there that kind of grew from there. And she's free of depression, which is wonderful on the backside when we put the emphasis on family and taking care of herself. I read something today, or it was a couple of days ago, and I'm going to butcher this quote, but you can't really take care of others till you take care of yourself too. You can only give what you have personally to share with somebody. So I would say, by putting the emphasis on mental health and relational health and so forth, coming back to having that support of our family was massive. We're in a better place mentally. We're in a better place relationally. We're in a better place physically. And I feel that we're in a more confident place to model health to our kids. So 100%. I'm glad that we took that pivot, and being on the other side of that, looking back, gosh, it's been 10 years now. Very, very fortunate that we did it.
Yeah. Amazing words, Brandon. You are an amazing guest. And I really loved, hearing your story again and learning even more about you. And I love that you put your family, that you really took that into account, that your family first. Even I know I know you have something to add here, because I know you do.
I love everything you talked about, Brendan, and also from a courageous being standpoint. One of the first taglines that I came up with when I was playing with this notion of, like, wait a minute, investing in ourselves technically, outside of the work hours is still so professional. So I would say the tagline is, personal development is professional. It was one of the first things I started saying, and you've given us so many good examples of that. Also, I do, just from my family standpoint, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is what I exposed my son to at the age of 4. He still practices. And all the examples that you gave, both, the physical component of it, but also the spiritual and the emotional and the symbolism of it too. What a great conversation around the comfortable with being uncomfortable and how much growth and expansion comes from that. Thank you so much for this amazing, amazing time together, and an invitation to, our other, we call us pivoters, to step into the pivot. If you've got one, some of them are mini, some of them are maxi. There are a lot of mediums. Brendan, I think you covered the whole gamut today in this conversation. We look forward to having you back, possibly Liz as well.
Yeah.
We'd love it.
Yeah. Thank you again so much, Brandon. We really do appreciate having you here with us this week. And as Ivana said, if you have a pivot, step into it.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Step Into the Pivot. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights from our conversation. Remember, life is a series of pivots, and it's in those moments of change that we truly grow.
If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay connected, make sure to check out our websites. You'll find additional resources, behind-the-scenes content, and more details about our incredible guests. We love hearing from listeners, so reach out with your thoughts, questions, or your own pivot stories.
To keep the conversation going, be sure to follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn and Instagram, where we share updates, quotes, and engage with our amazing community.
If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback makes a difference, and it helps us bring you meaningful conversations. We're signing off, reminding you that every pivot is a step forward. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Step Into the Pivot.